In the story of Gulliver's travels, the Lilliputians, who were tiny, tied down Gulliver as he slept on the beach, as he seemed to them to be a giant. Now, in British politics, the Munchkins have finally got their way against Boris Johnson, overruling the electorate and chasing him out of Parliament. It's extraordinary how parties like getting rid of their successful leaders, Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair, Boris Johnson, never defeated by the electorate, but brought down by their own parties. He brought an 80-seat majority to the Conservative Party. He delivered on Brexit. He led the world in its support for Ukraine against the illegal Russian invasion. He led an enviable vaccine rollout which enabled the British economy to open up before many of its counterparts. And he has the most extraordinary charisma that electorates connect to him. People stop their cars to get out and shake him by the hand, which I'm sorry to tell you they don't do to most other politicians. And this inevitably created an element of jealousy about him, a feeling that he was too tall a poppy, that he was Gulliver and we were Lilliputians. Of course, even Boris made mistakes. It would be absurd to pretend otherwise. He made errors of judgment, and he is a big figure, not necessarily always on the detail, but the consequences of trivial errors have been entirely disproportionate. And this is because of the disease we identified not long after State of the Nation launched, known as Boris spongiform encephalopathy. It is an extraordinary affliction of the mind, suffered particularly by those living in Islington with a penchant for European bureaucracy, who find him so enormously irritating that rational political thought and processing goes out of the window. They have to go for Boris, and they were determined to get him. And once again, he's shown why he is rather a good politician, because by taking the Chiltern Hundreds, or actually the other manor which gets you out of Parliament, he's escaped their clutches with one bound. And that's left his lefty opponents even more furious. Their fury is palpable because Boris has got out of Parliament. He's never been defeated by the voters. And if he gets back into Parliament, he may be in pole position to be leader of the party in future. But of course I want to know what you think. mailmog@gbnews.com. And now I'm very delighted to be joined by my friend and colleague Nigel Farage, who is partly an admirer of Boris and partly a critic, because you think he didn't do Brexit properly.
To begin, Sir Jacob.
Thank you.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. Well, there you are. Were you not going to mention it tonight?
I mentioned it in passing.
Well, you didn't really.
That's part of the honours.
Very gently. Anyway, well done.
Thank you very much.
Look, you know, I disagree with Boris Johnson on many things. His relaxed attitude to mass millions coming into our country, this net zero lunacy that makes the poor poorer and the rich richer. Many things I disagree with. However, on the biggest, most important, fundamental political and constitutional question, probably of our lifetimes, you know, Boris did make the right decision. And that was a big moment, and it mattered hugely. And as somebody who spent 25 years of his life campaigning for this and trying to wake up the British public, I'll be eternally grateful to him. I think his premiership was disappointing in the extreme. And you mentioned this in your talk-in, but I think there were too many unforced errors. You know, he gave the opposition too many brickbats with which, you know, they could beat him, and that was a shame. But he's out now of Parliament. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to stay within the Conservative Party. With Rishi, I think it's a case of this town ain't big enough for the both of us. I thought Rishi's comments today about the honours list and why he cut some of it was pretty vicious stuff. I just wonder, you know, you said when he's back in Parliament, he's deserted the party, he's gifted Uxbridge to the Labour Party.
Well, has he deserted the party?
Well, he has really, yes.
Because in a sense, the party deserted him, that he had the support of the party in the country, but enough Conservative members were against him last summer that he was forced out. And of course, you've always got a big chunk of Parliament against you, because they're the opposition. You only need a smallish part of your own party to turn against you to be forced out.
All the while Sunak is leader. All the while Sunak is leader, he will not be allowed, in my view, to run for the Conservatives.
Wouldn't that make Sunak look extremely petty and not be appreciated either by the Conservative Party in the country or by the voters who like mean-minded politicians?
Let's face it, Jacob. You know, the insurgency within the Conservative Party is over. the establishment are back in charge. The Remainers are back in charge. The Globalists are back in charge. It's not a Conservative party at all, it's a Social Democrat party. They will not want Boris back in the House of Commons at the next election, and I think he's going to struggle for a future within the party.
So what is the alternative? I mean, there's been stories in the paper saying that you would make a perfect team with Boris in a new party. Is that something you're thinking about?
No, what I said was this. If you poll the public and say Brexit, the two names come to mind, and it's myself and Boris Johnson. They are seen to be the two big names on our side of the argument. So you could argue that Boris's legacy is as Prime Minister getting us out of the European Union. You could argue my legacy was forcing the establishment into giving us a referendum. So this matters to both of us. Whilst there is not an immediate threat to us rejoining the European Union, there is a very major threat that the Conservative government have given up on getting rid of all those regulations, something that you tried to put in place, given up on keeping Northern Ireland as part of the United Kingdom, and that it's now very easy for Labour to sign us back up to a single market. So what I'm saying is this: if there has to be another battle at some point for Brexit itself, then if Johnson can't work with the Conservative Party, he needs to work with those outside.
But our political system makes it incredibly difficult to have a new party. You look at the history of new parties and they fade away. You were very lucky with UKIP because you had the European elections and therefore you could get, via proportional representation, into a national stage. But with first past the post, which I doubt Labour will change.
It's very difficult. I mean, look, no one knows more than me in modern times. 4 million votes and one seat. I know, Jacob, how hard it is. But all I would say to you is this. If you look at the polling being done by Professor Matthew Goodwin, often released on this channel, you will see a level of disenchantment with politics and political parties, and even with voting. Most people say, I'm going to vote for this party because I dislike them, a little bit less than the other one. If ever there was a moment for some kind of centre-right realignment, it's coming in the next few years.
But hasn't that always been true? That you can actually go back to Cicero and find quotes of people thinking the politicians of their day are absolutely useless, but if you go back a few years, they were all marvellous and great statesmen. I think it's a sign of a healthy democracy.
Yes, it is.
People are suspicious of that.
The difference is we're now living in broken Britain. We could be upset with Ted Heath in the 70s or whatever it may be. But we used to have a health service. I mean, you could go and see a GP. Your kids could get houses to live in. I mean, we are going through a period of time where generations that follow us are, in many cases, not able to enjoy the same standard of living that we've enjoyed. That's the fundamental difference.
And that's where you come to net zero, because one of the great propulsions for economic growth and improved standard of living has been cheap energy. Yeah. And we have decided to cut people off from cheap energy.
Populism is on the rise all across Europe. In America, well, we'll see.
Let's not call it populism. Let's call it winning elections.
Why not?
Because winning elections is a good thing, and for some reason populism is a bad thing.
Well, I don't think it is. I think the populist leader of Italy is doing really rather well, Giorgia Meloni. I think, there's a populist leader in Hungary, not to everybody's taste, but enormously popular.
And look what's happening in Spain. That'd be interesting.
Remarkable change in Spain.
Yes.
France, Le Pen is well ahead, albeit very left economically, but well ahead in the polls. And it's only in this country in which the centre-right, having won a stonking great majority, has decided to shift hugely towards the left, hugely towards the big state. I think if Johnson is to have a big role in the future of politics, I very much doubt it's with the Conservative Party. I think those bridges have now been burnt. I think there were too many in the party that won't forgive him. But if there are big battles to be fought for the legacy of Brexit, etc., he'll have to do it outside. And who's to say? The SDP were the last time a new party formed that got close. We'll see.